After Lamborghini unleashed its 1966 mid-rear engine supercar bombshell, the Miura, Enzo Ferrari, who believed that the horse should remain ahead of the carriage, kept producing front-engine V12 sports car with the mythical and supposedly stopgap that was the 1968 to 1973 Ferrari Daytona. Towards the end of the Daytona's production life and under pressure to match Lamborghini's racing and exotic engine configuration layout, Enzo finally succumbed to the pressure of producing a V12 mid-rear engine sports car for its customers. Ferrari had already offered a mid-engine sports car with its little V6 Dino series since 1968, but a V12 supercar was now needed to rival the Lamborghini Miura on the market since 1966. Ferrari had been using a mid-engine racer in F1 prior to this, but Enzo felt that this engine layout would be tricky for the men on the street. Finally, after a prototype was shown in 1971, Ferrari was ready to introduce their first 12-cylinder mid-rear engine supercar with the Ferrari 365 GT4 BB. A new 2500mm or 98.4-inch wheelbase chassis was assembled to receive the rear engine design, while ventilated disc brakes all around, all-independent suspension with dual-coil spring and tube shocks at the back set the pace. The design was by Pininfarina, then coach builder Sergio Scaglietti, located down the street from Ferrari, assembled almost all 365 BBs by hand. Pininfarina drew a low-profile hood, allowed by the engine now sitting at the back. Ferrari's new supercar had a thin nose adorned by a set of clear or orange rectangular turning signal/parking light cluster depending on the market. A pair of retractable pop-up headlights with two round lights on each side was located just above the turning signals. Between the pop-up headlights was a slatted brushed rectangular aluminum air vent sitting on the hood as seen on the 365 GT4 2+2 and 400 series. The 365 GT4 BB had a rear quarter window, and like the little Dinos, the rear window was vertical but not panoramic. Prolonging the roofline were rear buttresses adorning a black spoiler on top of the rear window to create downforce. The rear engine lead had two massive longitudinal black plastic rectangular carburetor covers with a battery of intake louvers on them. Under the body's belt line, the whole half bottom of the 365 BB was painted black, and the rear had the infamous and ugly three-round cluster taillights on each side, matched by the three exhaust pipes also fine on each side, not the best visual cue. To finish, the 5-spoke Cromodora alloy wheel set had a central spinner hub nut. Inside, only two bucket seats were found with a very simple rectangular binnacle under a 3-branch steering wheel now equipped with a more precise rack and pinion system. Two auxiliary gauges were also found in the center dash and by the door. No center console was found aboard, and the 5-speed transmission gear lever gate was exposed like it should be on any proper Ferrari. The engine was a little revelation because it was the first flat 12-cylinder for a production car. Both cylinder banks were flat and opposed to each other at 180 degrees. But even if this was evoked in the name, the BB didn't have a boxer engine but a flat V12 due to its piston not being opposed when in motion. Unlike the Dino program, the engine was placed longitudinally, but to not end up with a long tail, the gearbox was fitted underneath the engine, giving it a high center of gravity, not ideal for cornering. The flat 4-cam 12-cylinder engine had the same capacity as the 4.4 or 268 cubic inch V12 Daytona engine and developed 380 horsepower at 7,200 RPM. This propelled the Berlinetta Boxer from 0 to 62 miles per hour in 5.4 seconds, while the top speed was 175 miles per hour or 282 km per hour, falling short of the factory claim 188 miles per hour or 302 km per hour. In 1976, the first evolution arrived with the Ferrari 512 BB. Now the nomenclature revealed the engine size and number of cylinders, not the capacity of a single cylinder in cubic centimeters. But in a perfect I caught a fish that big Italian fashion, the engine was closer to a 4.9 liter or 302 cubic inch instead of a 5 liter. Still fed by 4 triple-choke Weber carburetors, this bigger engine had a dry sump unlike the unit found on the 365 GT4 BB, but it also was more restricted with 360 horsepower at 6,800 RPM. Nonetheless, it had 10% more torque and was more drivable around town. To increase handling, the rear track was widened and the rear suspension was revised. A front spoiler lip was also fitted to stop the unsettling front-end floating effect felt at high speed. The visually challenging 6 taillight and exhaust pipe configuration was gone and replaced by a dual set of each unit. An Aka air duct was also added in front of the rear wheel, below the belt line, channeling air to the rear brakes. Performance was on the slight decline, with a top speed of 168 miles per hour or 270 km per hour, and 5.6 seconds were now needed to reach 62 miles per hour from a standstill. The third and last evolution came in 1981 with the adoption of injection. Now called the Ferrari 512 IBB, it retained the 4.9-liter flat 12, but once again the power suffered due to this new technology. What the 512 IBB gained, though, was consistency in its tune-up and a better get-up-and-go around town. With 340 horsepower at a lower 6000 RPM, it still managed the same top speed as the 512BB, but 5.9 seconds were now needed to reach 62 miles per hour. On the outside, the 512 IBB shed its lower black tone for a matching color-coded body paint. New smaller side mirrors were also fitted, and additional parking lights were placed on each side of a now smaller grille. The alloy wheels received a center-lock bolt nut, but it was the adoption of the first low-profile Michelin TRX tires that changed many of the 512 IBB bad rear breaking away behaviors in hard cornering situations. This solution gave a somewhat happy ending to Ferrari's first mid-engine supercar, even if the BB was never sold to the American market due to emission issues. After a total of 2,323 Berlinetta Boxsters were produced between 1973 and 1984, the BB never stood up as the historically pivotal car that Ferrari had intended. Today, the BB's previous front-engine V12 sibling, the Daytona, is the one considered as a cult classic, even if considered old-fashioned at the time. Funny how history writes its own ironic twists sometimes.